The crystal towers of Zephyr Prime caught the morning light and split it into 1,000 colors. The beautiful city sparkled like a jewel in the pale blue sky. But today the rainbow lights could not hide the fear that filled every street and building. Ambassador Velthar stood in the highest tower, looking out at his dying world. His body was made of living crystal, clear as glass but strong as stone. Like all Zephyrians, he was tall and thin, with long arms that moved like tree branches in a gentle wind. His people had built the most beautiful cities in the galaxy. They were artists, teachers, and peaceful traders who had never hurt anyone. But beauty meant nothing to the Creak swarm. For 3 long years, the insect army had been eating their way through Zephyrian space. They came like a black cloud that covered the stars. Their ships looked like giant bugs, all claws and teeth and hunger. They did not want to talk or make deals. They only wanted to eat everything alive. Velthar remembered the first reports from the outer colonies. The messages had been short and filled with terror. "They're everywhere," one colony leader had said before the signal went dead. "They eat the plants, the animals, even the soil. Nothing is left." After that, only silence. Colony after colony fell to the swarm. Each time, the Zephyrians sent their small defense ships to help. Each time, those ships never came back. The Creak did not just defeat them, they consumed them, turning metal and crystal into more bugs for their army. Now the swarm was almost at Zephyr Prime itself. The homeworld. The last world Velthar walked to the great communications array, the most powerful radio in their galaxy. Other Zephyrians filled the crystal room around him. Their bodies flickered with nervous light, casting moving shadows on the walls. Everyone knew this might be their last day alive. "Are you ready, Ambassador?" asked Kylin, the chief speaker. Her crystal body was older than Velthar's, with tiny cracks that showed her many years of wisdom. "The message will reach every world in 1,000 light years." Velthar nodded. "We must try. Someone out there might help us." He had already tried asking the big powers of the galaxy. The proud Altarian Republic had the best weapons and the smartest generals. They had sent a polite message saying the risk was too great. The Centauran Federation had huge warships and millions of soldiers. They said the swarm was too close to Zephyr Prime now. It would be too dangerous to send help. One by one, every great civilization had said the same thing. They were sorry, but they could not risk their own people. They offered to take refugees, to save some Zephyrians after their world was destroyed, but no one would fight for them. "Begin the transmission," Velthar said. The communications array hummed to life, its crystal parts glowing brighter and brighter. The message would travel faster than light, jumping from star to star across the galaxy. "This is Ambassador Velthar of the Zephyrian Collective," he began. His voice was steady, but inside he felt like he was breaking apart. "We are calling for help from anyone who can hear us. The Creak swarm has destroyed our colonies. They are coming for our homeworld. We have 14 days before they arrive." He paused, thinking of all the things his people would lose. The crystal gardens that had grown for 1,000 years. The libraries full of beautiful stories and songs. The children who would never grow up to create art of their own. "We offer everything we have," he continued. "Our technology, our knowledge, our art, our territory. Everything. All we ask is for someone to stand with us. To help us fight. We know the odds are bad, but we must try. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need your help." The transmission ended. Now there was nothing to do but wait and hope. Hours passed. The great powers of the galaxy sent the same messages as before. Sympathy, but no soldiers. Offers to help survivors, but no one willing to fight. With each message, the hope in the Crystal City grew dimmer. Then, from an unknown part of space came something unexpected. The signal was weak and crude. It did not use the elegant frequencies of advanced civilizations. Instead, it crackled with static and interference. But the voice that spoke was clear and strong. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. We got your message. Help is coming." Velthar stared at the communication device. "Earth?" he said to Kylin. "Have you ever heard of this world?" The chief speaker's crystal body flickered as she accessed their databases. "Yes, but this is very strange. Earth is listed as a Class 12 death world. It says here that the planet is extremely dangerous. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive animals everywhere. No known species could live there safely. But someone is answering from there," Velthar said. "These humans, whoever they are." More information appeared on their screens. Earth was a small blue planet around a yellow star. The surveys were old and brief. Every exploration team that had visited had left quickly, reporting that the world was too hostile for any civilized life. The gravity was twice what most species could handle. The weather changed without warning, creating storms that could destroy cities. The animals were all predators, fighting each other constantly for survival. It was the kind of world that intelligent life should avoid completely. Yet someone lived there, someone who had heard their call for help. "Commander Morrison," Velthar said into the communicator, "we are grateful that you answered. But you must understand what you are facing. The Creak swarm numbers in the millions. Their bioships can heal damage and change to fight different weapons. Even the greatest armies in the galaxy have called this battle hopeless." The human voice came back immediately. "Ambassador, we heard you asking for help. That's all we needed to know. We're bringing 47 ships and 8,000 Marines. We'll be there in 6 days. But the numbers," Velthar tried to explain. "Your force is so small compared to the swarm. How can you hope to win?" There was a pause. Then the human spoke again, and something in his voice made Velthar's crystal body shiver. It was not fear or doubt. It was something harder and colder. "Sir," Commander Morrison said, "my people have a saying, we don't leave anyone behind, ever. You called for help and we're coming. The size of the enemy doesn't matter. What matters is doing what's right." The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrians in stunned silence. Kylan was the first to speak. "What kind of species lives on a death world and still comes to help strangers?" Velthar did not have an answer. In all his years of studying other civilizations, he had never heard of anyone like these humans. Every species in the galaxy made decisions based on logic and self-interest. They weighed costs against benefits. They calculated risks and rewards, but these humans seemed to work differently. They had heard a cry for help from across the galaxy, from people they had never met, and they were coming anyway, not because they would gain something from it, but because they thought it was the right thing to do. "Perhaps," Velthar said quietly, "living on a world that tries to kill you every day teaches you something about fighting impossible battles." Outside the Crystal Tower, the first reports were coming in from the edge of their solar system. Long-range sensors showed the Creak swarm approaching like a black tide of death. Millions of bioships, each one hungry for flesh and growing larger as they consumed everything in their path. But somewhere behind them, racing through space at maximum speed, came 47 crewed ships carrying 8,000 warriors from a world so dangerous that no one else could survive there. The Zephyrians had asked the stars for aid. Now they would learn what kind of help comes from a death world. The space around Zephyr Prime shimmered and twisted as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Velthar watched from his crystal tower as 47 ships appeared on the edge of his solar system. They looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the Altarian Republic or the massive dreadnoughts of the Centauran Federation. The human ships were ugly by galactic standards. They had sharp angles and thick armor plating. Weapons stuck out from every surface like thorns on a dangerous plant. The largest ship, which the humans called the ESN Vengeance, looked more like a flying fortress than a spacecraft. It was covered in scars from old battles, as if it had been built to take damage and keep fighting. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Commander Jake Morrison stood looking at the tactical display. The screen showed the Creak swarm surrounding Zephyr Prime like a cloud of angry insects. Millions of bioships moved in perfect coordination, each one the size of a building and covered in natural weapons. Morrison was a typical human by his species standards, but he would have seemed like a monster to most galactic races. He was short and thick with muscle, built to survive in Earth's crushing gravity. His skin was scarred from years of fighting, and his eyes held the cold look of someone who had seen too much death but refused to give up. "How many of them are there?" asked First Officer Lisa Chen. She was smaller than Morrison but just as tough, with quick hands that never stopped moving as she worked the ship's controls. "Sensors show approximately 3 million bioships," reported Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez from the weapons station. He was young for a human officer, but his fingers danced over the targeting systems like he was playing a musical instrument. "They're arranged in a sphere formation around the planet. Looks like they're getting ready to start the final attack." Morrison nodded. "Any word from the planet's surface?" "Incoming transmission now, sir," said Lisa. The main screen flickered and showed Ambassador Velthar standing in his crystal tower. The alien's transparent body was flickering with nervous light, and his voice shook as he spoke. Commander Morrison, we are grateful that you came, but you must see the situation is hopeless. Our sensors count over 3 million enemy vessels. Your 47 ships cannot possibly defeat such numbers. Perhaps you should take some of our people and leave while you still can. Morrison's face did not change expression. Around him, the bridge crew continued their work without showing any fear or doubt. This confused Velthar greatly. Did these humans not understand mathematics? Could they not see that they were outnumbered by more than 60,000 to 1? Ambassador, Morrison said in a calm voice, and we didn't come here to run away. We came here to fight, and we're going to win. But how? Velthar asked. The Creak bioships can heal themselves. They adapt to weapons that hurt them. They learn from every battle and become stronger. The greatest military minds in the galaxy have studied them for decades and found no weakness. Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had found prey. That's their first mistake. They've been fighting civilized species. They've never fought humans before. He turned to his crew. All ships, this is Morrison. We're going in. Target the outer ring of bioships first. Use kinetic rounds only, no energy weapons. And remember, we're not here to look pretty. We're here to kill bugs. The human fleet began to move toward the swarm, but instead of spreading out in the careful formations that other species used, they moved in tight groups. Instead of trying to fight from a safe distance, they accelerated directly toward the enemy. On Zephyr Prime, Velthar watched in horror as the tiny human force charged straight at the massive swarm. They're committing suicide, he whispered to Kylan. No sane species would attack like that. But the humans were not acting insane. They were acting like humans. Every person on every ship had grown up on a world that tried to kill them every single day. Earth was a planet where the weather could change from peaceful sunshine to deadly storms in minutes. Where earthquakes could split the ground open without warning. Where every animal was a predator and every plant might be poisonous. On such a world, the beings that survived were not the ones who were careful. They were the ones who struck first and struck hard. They were the ones who, when faced with a larger predator, did not run away but instead found a way to kill it. The first contact between human and Creak forces happened at the edge of the swarm formation. A group of bioships, each one 3 times the size of the human vessels, moved to intercept the attackers. The bioships were beautiful in their own terrible way, all flowing curves and organic weapons that pulsed with living energy. The humans opened fire with weapons that made the Creak pause in confusion. Instead of the clean energy beams that other species used, the human ships shot chunks of metal at incredible speed. Railguns fired tungsten slugs that moved at a significant fraction of light speed. Mass drivers hurled dense projectiles that hit with the force of small asteroids. The bioships tried to adapt as they always did. Their living hulls began to change, growing thicker armor to absorb the impact. But the human weapons did not work like energy beams that could be reflected or absorbed. They were simple, brutal, and unstoppable. When a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speed hits something, there is no adaptation possible. There is only destruction. The first bioship to die simply came apart. One moment it was a living creature the size of a city block. The next moment it was scattered pieces floating in space. The other bioships in the group hesitated, their simple minds trying to understand what had happened. That hesitation was fatal. The humans did not pause to analyze or adapt. They simply kept shooting. Direct hit on Target 7. Danny reported from his weapons station. Target is destroyed. Moving to Target 8. Good shooting, Morrison said. Lisa, bring us closer. I want to be within ramming distance. Ramming distance, sir? Lisa asked. You heard me. These bugs like to get up close and personal. Let's show them what that really means. The Vengeance accelerated toward the nearest group of bioships. The Creak vessels, expecting the humans to maintain safe firing distance like every other species, suddenly found the enemy ship almost on top of them. What happened next violated every rule of civilized space combat. Instead of elegant maneuvering and careful tactical positioning, the humans simply crashed into their enemies. The Vengeance's armored hull smashed into the side of a bioship twice its size. The impact would have destroyed most galactic vessels. But the human ship had been built on a world where everything was harder, heavier, and more dangerous than anywhere else in the galaxy. It punched through the bioship's hull like a bullet through paper. As the bioship died around them, human marines in powered armor began cutting their way out of their ship and into the enemy vessel. They carried weapons that no civilized species would use. chemical explosive charges, flamethrowers, and vibrating blades that could cut through almost anything. Sergeant Mike O'Brien kicked open an airlock and led his squad into the bioship's interior. The organic corridors were filled with acidic atmosphere that would have killed most galactic species in seconds. The human armor protected them, but more importantly, they simply did not care about the danger. "Spread out," O'Brien ordered his Marines. "Find the control center and blow it up. Kill anything that moves." The Marines advanced through the living ship like they were walking through a jungle on Earth. They had been trained since childhood to expect that everything around them was trying to kill them. A spaceship made of hostile biology was just another Tuesday for them. Behind them, more human ships were ramming into the swarm. Each impact brought Marines who fought like demons, turning the bioships into battlegrounds where the Creak faced an enemy unlike anything they had evolved to handle. On Zephyr Prime, Velthar watched the battle with growing amazement. The humans were not just fighting the swarm, they were winning. Ship after ship of the mighty Creak forces was going dark as human Marines tore them apart from the inside. "How is this possible?" he asked Kylan. "They are so few and the swarm is so many." The old Zephyrian's crystal body flickered with thought. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "when you come from a world where everything is trying to kill you, you learn to be very good at killing back." The battle was just beginning, but already the humans had done something that no other species had ever managed. They had made the Creak swarm afraid. Inside the bioship, Sergeant Mike O'Brien led his Marines deeper into the enemy vessel. The walls around them were alive, pulsing like the inside of a giant heart. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling, and the air was thick with poisonous gases that would kill most galactic species in seconds. But the Marines kept moving forward, their sealed armor protecting them from the hostile environment. "Contact ahead," whispered Private Kelly Brooks, raising her rifle. Down the organic corridor, something moved in the shadows. It was big, much bigger than a human, with multiple legs and razor-sharp claws that could cut through steel. The Creak warrior was 3 meters tall and covered in natural armor that had evolved over millions of years. Its compound eyes could see in multiple spectrums of light, and its reflexes were faster than any known predator. It had been designed by evolution to be the perfect killer, combining intelligence with deadly instincts, but it had never fought a human before. The warrior charged down the corridor, expecting to overwhelm the small creatures with its size and speed. Its claws extended, ready to slice the intruders apart. In its simple mind, this would be like every other battle against civilized species who would panic and retreat when faced with superior force. Instead, the humans opened fire. Chemical projectile weapons filled the corridor with thunder. Bullets designed to punch through armor plating tore into the warrior's carapace. But even as the creature staggered under the impact, it kept coming. Its biology allowed it to ignore wounds that would stop other beings. That was when it learned the difference between fighting civilized species and fighting humans. O'Brien stepped forward with a vibroblade, a weapon that vibrated thousands of times per second to cut through almost any material. But instead of trying to stay at a safe distance, he moved closer to the wounded warrior. As its claws swept down toward him, he rolled under the attack and drove his blade up into the creature's soft underside. The Creak warrior had never encountered prey that moved toward danger instead of away from it. Its evolutionary instincts had no response for an enemy that seemed to become more aggressive when faced with superior size and strength. "Clear," O'Brien called as the warrior collapsed. "Keep moving. We need to find the brain center of this thing." The Marines advanced deeper into the bioship. Behind them, similar battles were happening throughout the swarm, as human boarding parties turned every captured vessel into a killing ground. The Creak had evolved to hunt creatures that would flee when attacked. They had no experience fighting beings that would charge into battle even when outnumbered and outgunned. On the surface of Zephyr Prime, the situation was becoming desperate. Millions of Creak drop pods had landed across the crystal planet, each one releasing hundreds of warrior forms. The beautiful cities that had taken centuries to build were being overrun in hours. In the capital city, Ambassador Velthar watched from his tower as black swarms of warriors poured through the streets below. The few Zephyrian defense forces had been overwhelmed quickly. Their weapons were designed to stun rather than kill, because the Zephyrians had never believed in violence. Against the Creak, such weapons were useless. "Ambassador," Kylan called from the communication station. The humans are requesting coordinates for their landing forces. Velthar looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was still fighting in space, but somehow they had found ships to spare for a ground assault. Tell them the situation is hopeless. The entire planet is overrun. There is nowhere safe to land. I already told them that, sir. Their response was to ask for coordinates anyway. Through the crystal windows of the tower, Velthar could see the first human dropships breaking through the atmosphere. They were small and angular, designed more for surviving impact than for graceful flight. As he watched, one of them was hit by Creak bioweapons and began spinning out of control. Instead of crashing or retreating, the damaged dropship adjusted its course and aimed directly at the largest concentration of Creak warriors in the city center. The ship hit the ground like a meteor, crushing dozens of warriors and creating a crater in the middle of the enemy formation. Before the dust had settled, armored figures began climbing out of the wreckage. Human Marines, their armor scorched and dented but still functional, immediately began setting up defensive positions in the crater their ship had created. Impossible, breathed Velthar. They survived that crash? More dropships were landing throughout the city, some in controlled landings, but many simply crashing wherever they could do the most damage to enemy forces. From each impact site, human soldiers emerged ready to fight. Colonel Rick Santos pulled himself out of his damaged dropship and surveyed the battlefield. The Crystal City was beautiful even in its destruction, with towers that caught and scattered light in brilliant patterns. But beauty was not his concern right now. His job was to keep the Zephyrian civilians alive. First Squad, set up heavy weapons on that tower, he ordered, pointing to a nearby crystal spire. Second Squad, start digging in around the Civic Center. Third Squad, find me the biggest concentration of bugs and call in artillery. His Marines moved with practiced efficiency, turning the elegant Zephyrian architecture into a fortress. They placed explosive charges to bring down buildings and create barriers. They set up machine gun nests in positions that gave clear fields of fire. They transformed the beautiful city into a killing ground. The Creak warriors that came to attack them found something they had never encountered before. Most galactic species, when faced with overwhelming numbers, would try to retreat to safer positions or call for evacuation. The humans did the opposite. They seemed to become more dangerous the worse their situation became. When Creak swarms overran a human position, instead of breaking and running, the Marines would regroup and attack even more aggressively. When they ran out of ammunition, they switched to melee weapons. When those broke, they fought with improvised clubs in their bare hands. They acted as if the very idea of giving up was personally insulting to them. Private Danny Kim found himself surrounded by a dozen Creak warriors in one of the city's art galleries. His rifle was empty, his sidearm was jammed, and his vibro blade had snapped in half during the previous fight. By all logical measures, he should have been dead within seconds. Instead, he grabbed a piece of crystal sculpture and began using it as a club. The first warrior to reach him received the improvised weapon across its compound eyes. The second got a knee to what passed for its groin. The third discovered that humans could bite hard enough to crack chitin when properly motivated. The Creak had evolved as hunters, but they had never encountered prey that fought back with such relentless fury. Their simple minds could not process the idea of creatures that became more dangerous when cornered rather than less. Throughout the city, similar scenes played out as human Marines turned every building into a fortress and every street into a battlefield. They did not just fight to survive. They fought as if losing was not an option that existed in their universe. Dr. Emma Phillips worked frantically in a mobile laboratory set up in the ruins of a Zephyrian museum. While explosions shook the building around her, she studied samples of captured Creak tissue. Her mission was to find some biological weakness that could be exploited. "Colonel Santos," she called over the communication system, "I think I found something important. The swarm's coordination depends on chemical signals, pheromones that link their minds together. If we can disrupt those signals, we might be able to break their hive mind." Santos ducked as a Creak plasma bolt melted the wall next to his head. "Can you make something to do that?" "Yes, but it would have to be deployed inside their command ship. Someone would need to get into the heart of their fleet and release the compound directly into their neural center." Santos smiled grimly. "Doc, you just described a suicide mission." "I know. I'm sorry, but there's no other way to deploy it effectively." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me how much of this stuff you need and where to put it." Within an hour, Phillips had synthesized enough of the compound to disrupt the swarm's neural network. The plan was simple in concept but deadly in execution. A team would have to penetrate the largest bioship in the fleet, fight their way to its brain center, and detonate the chemical weapon inside the neural core. The volunteers lined up before Santos had finished explaining the mission. Captain Tony Vasquez stood at the front of the line. "Sir, request permission to lead the assault team." Santos looked at the faces around him. Every Marine was ready to die to complete the mission. It was not because they were eager for death or because they did not understand the risks. It was because they came from a world where impossible situations were just another day at the office. "Permission granted, Captain. Take whoever you need." As the assault team prepared for what everyone knew would be a one-way trip, the battle for Zephyr Prime continued to rage. But something had changed in the last few hours. The Creak, for the first time in their species' history, were learning what it meant to be afraid. They had conquered dozens of civilizations, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. The humans did not fight like civilized beings following rules of war. Captain Tony Vasquez stood in the loading bay of the human assault ship, checking his weapons one last time. Around him, 24 Marines prepared for what everyone knew would be their final mission. They were about to enter the largest bioship in the Creak fleet, a massive creature that served as the brain of the entire swarm. The ship was the size of a small city, floating in space like a giant insect made of metal and flesh. Its surface was covered in weapons that could destroy entire fleets, and its interior was filled with millions of warrior forms ready to defend their queen. Getting inside would be almost impossible. Getting to the brain center would be suicide. "Listen up," Vasquez told his team. "We all know the odds. This thing has been eating civilizations for decades. Its defenses have stopped every attack the galaxy has tried. But those other species were fighting to win battles. We're fighting to save lives." Sergeant Lisa Murphy checked the chemical weapon Dr. Phillips had given them. The device was small, no bigger than a briefcase, but it contained enough compound to shatter the swarm's hive mind across the entire system. "How do we know this will work, Captain?" "We don't," Vasquez admitted. "But the doc is smart, and she says the science is solid. All we have to do is get it to the neural center and activate it. Simple." Private Bob Chen laughed despite the tension. "Simple like walking into a volcano and setting off a bomb." "Pretty much," Vasquez agreed. "But remember, we come from a world where volcanoes are just another thing that tries to kill us. And we're still here." The assault ship accelerated toward the massive bioship, its engines straining against the gravitational pull of the creature's bulk. Around them, space was filled with smaller Creak vessels trying to intercept them. Human fighter pilots engaged the defenders, creating a corridor of destruction that the assault ship could follow. Commander Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as his people flew into certain death. He had sent thousands of soldiers into battle over the years, but this felt different. This was not just about winning a fight. This was about proving that sometimes the impossible was just another word for difficult. "How long until they reach the target?" he asked Lisa Chen. 3 minutes to contact," she replied. "The bioship is trying to close its outer ports, but our fighters are keeping them busy." On the surface of Zephyr Prime, the battle had reached a critical point. Colonel Santos and his Marines had managed to establish several strongholds throughout the Crystal City, but they were surrounded by millions of Creak warriors. Every hour brought new waves of attackers, and the human ammunition supplies were running dangerously low. "Sir," reported Sergeant O'Brien, "we're down to our last magazines. After this, it's knives and rocks." Santos nodded grimly. "Then we'd better make every shot count. Pass the word to all positions. When the ammo runs out, fix bayonets and prepare for close combat." The Zephyrians watching from their towers could not understand what they were seeing. By every logical measure, the human force should have been wiped out hours ago. They were outnumbered by thousands to one. They had no supplies coming from space. They had nowhere to retreat. But instead of giving up, they seemed to be getting stronger. When Creak warriors broke through human defensive lines, the Marines would counterattack with such fury that the attackers would be driven back. When positions became untenable, the humans would blow them up rather than let them fall into enemy hands, then fight their way to new positions and start again. Ambassador Velthar watched a group of human Marines charge into a mass of Creak warriors, their battle cry echoing off the crystal walls. The insects outnumbered them 10 to 1, but somehow the humans broke through and kept advancing. They fight like they are already dead. Kylin observed, as if death holds no fear for them. No, Velthar said slowly. They fight like death is just another enemy to defeat. High above the planet, Captain Vasquez and his team had reached the outer hull of the massive bioship. The assault ship crashed through a weapon port, its armored nose punching deep into the creature's flesh. Before the bioship could seal the wound, the Marines were already cutting their way deeper into its interior. The inside of the bioship was like a nightmare made real. The walls were covered in veins and arteries that pulsed with alien blood. The air was thick with spores that would have killed most galactic species instantly. Organic growths hung from the ceiling like deadly fruit, and the floor was slippery with fluids that burned like acid. "Which way to the brain?" asked Sergeant Murphy, consulting the scanner Dr. Phillips had given them. "That way." Vasquez pointed down a corridor that seemed to be breathing. "About 2 kilometers through the most hostile environment in the galaxy. Should be fun." The team moved forward, their boots splashing through pools of bioacid. Behind them, the entry wound was already starting to heal, sealing them inside the creature. There would be no retreat. The only way out was through the mission. They had not gone far when the first defenders appeared. Creak warrior forms emerged from side passages, their claws extended and their mandibles clicking with hunger. But these were not ordinary warriors. These creatures had been grown specifically to defend the brain center, bred for maximum lethality and equipped with natural weapons that could cut through steel. The first wave hit the Marines like a living avalanche. Creatures the size of bears, but faster and deadlier, threw themselves at the human formation. In the narrow corridor, there was no room for fancy tactics or elegant maneuvering. It was simply a matter of who could kill faster. The humans opened fire with everything they had. Assault rifles, shotguns, and grenade launchers filled the organic corridor with destruction. But for every warrior they killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Creak kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their dead to reach the invaders. Private Chen found himself face to face with a warrior twice his size. His rifle was empty and the creature's claws were reaching for his throat. Instead of trying to retreat, he pulled the pins on 2 grenades and wrapped his arms around the creature's neck. "For Earth!" he shouted, and the explosion took both of them. The sacrifice created a gap in the enemy line that Vasquez's team used to push forward. They advanced over the bodies of their comrades and enemies alike, fighting for every meter of ground. The bioship seemed to sense their purpose and began changing its internal structure, growing new barriers and releasing deadly gases to stop them. But the humans adapted faster than the ship could change. When passages filled with poison gas, they switched to sealed breathing systems. When new walls grew to block their path, they used explosives to blast through. When gravity fields tried to crush them, they braced each other up and kept moving. They fought through swarms of smaller creatures that came at them like living bullets. They climbed over mountains of organic matter that tried to digest them alive. They burned their way through forests of nerve endings that screamed with alien pain. Finally, after what seemed like hours of constant battle, they reached the neural center. The brain of the bioship was a massive chamber filled with pulsing tissue that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. Electrical impulses raced along nerve pathways as thick as tree trunks, carrying the commands that controlled millions of Creak warriors across the system. At the center of it all was a structure that looked like a giant flower made of flesh and metal. This was the nexus, the point where all the swarm's communications converged. If Dr. Phillips was right, destroying this would break the Hive mind and leave every Creak warrior isolated and confused. Vasquez looked at his remaining team. Of the 24 Marines who had started the mission, only 6 were still alive. They were wounded, exhausted, and surrounded by enemies, but they had made it to their target. "Sergeant Murphy, activate the device," he ordered. Murphy pulled out the chemical weapon and began setting the timer. Around them, the bioship was mobilizing every defense it had. Warrior forms were pouring into the chamber from every entrance, and the walls themselves were beginning to sprout weapons. 30 seconds until detonation, Murphy reported. "Good," Vasquez said, raising his rifle. "Let's give them something to remember us by." The final battle was brief but savage. The remaining Marines formed a circle around the chemical device, firing at everything that moved. They knew they would not survive the next minute, but they also knew that their sacrifice would save millions of lives across the galaxy. When the device exploded, it released a cloud of engineered molecules that spread through the neural network faster than thought itself. The compound disrupted the chemical bonds that allowed the Creak to share consciousness, severing connections that had existed for millions of years. Across the entire swarm, the effect was instantaneous. Warriors who had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly stopped and looked around in confusion. Ship formations broke apart as individual vessels began flying in random directions. The unstoppable force that had terrorized the galaxy for decades suddenly became a collection of lost and frightened insects. On Zephyr Prime, Colonel Santos watched in amazement as the Creak warriors attacking his position simply wandered away, no longer interested in fighting. In space, Commander Morrison saw enemy bioships beginning to attack each other, their hive mind shattered beyond repair. The silence that followed the destruction of the Creak hive mind was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Across the Zephyr system, millions of bioships that had moved like parts of a single organism suddenly began drifting aimlessly through space. Some collided with each other, others simply stopped moving entirely. A few began attacking anything nearby, including other Creak vessels. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Commander Morrison watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display. The unstoppable swarm that had terrified civilizations for decades was falling apart before his eyes. "All ships, this is Morrison," he announced over the fleet communication system. "The enemy hive mind is down. Begin the counteroffensive. Every bioship in this system dies today. We finish this now." The human fleet moved through the scattered Creak forces like wolves hunting confused sheep. Without their shared consciousness, the individual bioships had no idea how to coordinate their defenses. They had evolved to be part of a greater whole, not to think for themselves. Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez worked his weapons controls with deadly precision. "Target destroyed. Moving to next contact. These things don't even know we're shooting at them." It was true. Many of the bioships simply floated in space, their simple minds overwhelmed by the sudden isolation. Others tried to flee but had no idea which direction was safe. The few that attempted to fight back did so without any strategy or coordination. On the surface of Zephyr Prime, Colonel Santos emerged from his defensive position to find Creak warriors wandering through the Crystal City like lost children. Without the hive mind to guide them, they had forgotten why they were fighting or what they were supposed to do. "All units, weapons free," Santos ordered. "Hunt down every bug on this planet. Show no mercy. These things would have eaten every Zephyrian alive if we hadn't stopped them." The human marines spread out through the city, methodically eliminating the scattered Creak forces. It was not a battle anymore. It was an execution. The creatures that had once seemed unstoppable were now confused and helpless, easy targets for soldiers who had been fighting impossible odds for days. Sergeant O'Brien led his squad through the art district, where crystal sculptures lay broken among the bodies of fallen warriors. "Sweep every building," he ordered. "I don't want a single bug left alive when we're done here." The cleanup took 3 days. When it was finished, not a single Creak remained alive in the Zephyr system. The swarm that had consumed dozens of civilizations had been completely destroyed by a species most of the galaxy had never heard of. Ambassador Velthar stood in the ruins of his crystal city, watching human engineers help Zephyrian workers begin the reconstruction. The humans worked with the same intensity they had shown in battle, treating the rebuilding as another mission to complete. "Ambassador," Commander Morrison said, approaching with a datapad in his hands, "I have the final casualty reports." Velthar's crystal body flickered with nervous light. He dreaded hearing how many of these brave humans had died to save his people. "How many did we lose?" Morrison consulted his pad. "We lost 843 Marines and crew members. Another 2,000 were wounded, but they'll recover." The Zephyrian was stunned. "Less than 1,000? But you fought millions of enemies. How is that possible?" "We knew what we were doing," Morrison said simply. "And we had good reasons to fight. That makes all the difference." What Morrison did not say was that the human losses would have been considered impossibly light by any other galactic military. Most species expected to lose at least half their forces when facing odds like the ones at Zephyr Prime. The humans had accomplished what should have been impossible while taking minimal casualties. Word of the victory spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Within days, representatives from every major civilization were requesting meetings with the mysterious humans. The species that had been ignored as primitive Deathworlders had suddenly become the most important military force in the galaxy. The first to arrive was Admiral Xandar of the Altarian Republic, commanding a fleet of their most advanced warships. His people were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and large eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. They prided themselves on being the most technologically advanced civilization in the galaxy. "Commander Morrison," Admiral Xandar said as his image appeared on the communication screen, "the Altarian Republic wishes to express its admiration. For your victory over the Creak swarm, we would like to discuss a mutual defense treaty and technology exchange program." Morrison looked at the alien admiral with interest. "What kind of technology exchange?" "We offer our most advanced energy weapons, faster-than-light communication systems, and medical technology that could extend human lifespans by centuries. In return, we would like to study your military tactics and perhaps establish joint training programs." Similar offers came from the Centauran Federation, the Vegan Trade Alliance, and dozens of smaller civilizations. Everyone wanted to be friends with the humans now that they had proven their military capabilities. Dr. Emma Phillips found herself at the center of a scientific revolution. Her discovery of how to disrupt the Creak hive mind had not only won the battle but opened up new fields of xenobiology research. Universities across the galaxy were offering her positions, and research institutes were bidding for the rights to study her work. "The galaxy wants to understand how we did it," she explained to Morrison during a briefing session. "They're offering us access to scientific databases that contain the accumulated knowledge of thousands of civilizations." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "What do you think, Doc? Should we take their offers?" Phillips considered the question carefully. "The technology they're offering could help us a lot. Medical advances, better weapons, faster ships. But I think the most important thing we could gain is knowledge. We need to understand this galaxy if we're going to protect Earth and our allies." 3 weeks after the battle, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss humanity's status. The Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Harmony Station had never seen such attendance. Representatives from every major civilization were present, along with observers from hundreds of smaller species. Ambassador Velthar was given the honor of presenting humanity's case for recognition. His crystal body had been repaired since the battle, but he still carried scars from the fighting that would never fully heal. "Members of the Council," he began, "I stand before you as a representative of a people who were facing extinction. The Creak swarm had consumed our colonies and was preparing to devour our homeworld. We called for help, and the great powers of the galaxy offered their sympathy but not their swords." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many of the representatives looked uncomfortable at being reminded of their refusal to help. "Then came a species we had never heard of," Velthar continued. "Humans from a world so dangerous that our surveys classified it as uninhabitable. They came not for profit or territory or political advantage. They came because we asked for help, and they believed it was the right thing to do." He activated a holographic display showing the battle statistics. 47 human ships defeated 3 million Creak bioships. 8,000 human marines saved a planet of 30 billion Zephyrians. They accomplished what our combined fleet said was impossible. The assembly hall was completely silent now. Every representative was studying the numbers, trying to understand how such a thing could happen. But the most remarkable thing, Velthar said, is what they asked for in return. Nothing. They have refused territorial concessions, declined technological bribes, and turned down offers of tribute. They say they fought because it needed to be done. Admiral Xandar of the Altarian Republic stood to address the assembly. The Altarian Republic moves to grant humanity immediate recognition as a Category Alpha civilization and full membership in the Galactic Council. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, a species was being elevated to the highest status not because of their technology or their territory, but because of their proven ability to stand against impossible odds and win. Commander Morrison stood before the assembled representatives as they formally welcomed humanity to the galactic community. He looked out at thousands of different species, all of them now eager to be allies with the Deathworlders who had saved Zephyr Prime. "Members of the Council," he said, "humanity accepts this honor, but we want you to understand something important. We didn't fight the Creak to gain recognition or status. We fought them because they were hurting innocent people, and that's something we can't allow." He paused, looking directly at several representatives who had refused to help the Zephyrians. "From this day forward, Any species that calls for help against extinction will find humanity ready to answer. That's not a political position or a military strategy. That's who we are. In the months that followed, the phrase "calling the humans" became common throughout the galaxy. It meant turning to a solution that seemed impossible but might just work. Pirates learned to avoid systems under human protection. Slavers found their operations disrupted by human special forces.